Welcome, Laura. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation because I am a productivity nut to begin with, but I found a lot of interesting variances in your book compared to some of the things that I do. So it was very interesting. Before we get into some of the rules that the book covers, 9 ways to calm the chaos, I'm wondering if you could share what the Tranquility by Tuesday project was that you based the book on.
Yeah, so I write self-help for very busy people. And so if I'm going to recommend something, I want to know that it actually works, that this self-help is reliably helpful. So I recruited 150 people to try out these 9 time management rules over a period of about 9 weeks. So this happened in spring of 2021. They filled out all sorts of information at the beginning, demographics, how they felt about their lives and so forth, how they spent their time. Then each week they would learn a new rule. They would then answer questions about how they planned to implement this rule in their life. And then a week later, they would answer more questions on how it went. And this cycle would repeat through the 9 rules over 9 weeks. And then at the end of the project, I measured them again on various dimensions on how they felt about time, and did so 1 month and 3 months later as well. And so the goal was to see if people at least try to follow these rules and think about how they're going to try to follow these rules in their lives, will they feel better about their time? And the good news is yes, they do. So I was happy to
Fantastic.
see that.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that they're called rules, but you've got a lot of flexibility in there because throughout the book, you describe sort of pushback that you received from participants or challenges they had. And so they're rules, but they're not rigid rules, right?
No, and I know some people are like, rules, I don't want to follow rules. It reminds me too much of school or something like that. No, it might help to just think of them as guidelines, as strategies, as ideas you should think about putting in your life. You don't have to do anything. I'm certainly not going to make anyone do anything, but I do know that other busy people have tried these rules, suggestions, strategies, whatever you want to call them, and have seen really cool things happen in their lives as a result. And so, I'm suggesting that readers try them out.
Excellent. Okay. Well, the first 3 rules in the book are about calming down, which almost everyone I know needs to calm down a little bit. Most people think they don't have enough time. They're frantically trying to get things done. And so I'm wondering if you can share, just an example of how calming down can help us with our schedule or our time management.
Yeah. So, really quick, the first 3 rules, one is to give yourself a bedtime. The second is to plan on Fridays. The third is to move by 3 p.m. And so these are very simple rules. This is not rocket science, but giving yourself a bedtime is a very easy way to make sure that you are not only getting enough sleep, but that you are getting that amount of sleep pretty much every single day, which allows people to just feel so much more in control of their time, to have more energy, to be able to plan their lives with some predictability, because when a day begins, when a day ends, and then you can make mindful choices about what you wish to include in that space of hours. Planning allows us to figure out what is important for us to do. When we look at a week as a whole, we make more mindful choices about what we wish to put into it. We solve problems that we see coming up. We make progress toward our goals. And by moving, by 3 p.m. every day, we are boosting our energy, making sure we're taking breaks, getting a little bit of physical activity, which can boost mood and all that sort of thing. But taken together, yes, these rules will help people calm down. They will help people, start to react to life less as it's coming at you, and more saying, well, I am in charge of my time. I have the ability to approach time strategically by being smart about how I take care of myself, how I view my calendar in general. And by calming down, we just find that life is less of this sense of chaos. It's more orderly. Yes, life is still complex. The metaphor I sometimes like to use is a circus. And when people say life is a circus, they are like, oh, it's out of control, everything is moving everywhere. But if you've ever been to a circus, there's a problem with that metaphor because yes, circuses are very complex. There are a ton of moving parts, but it is so well organized. Everyone gets where they're going at exactly the right time. No one gets shot out of a cannon when they are not supposed to be shot out of a cannon, right? And so we actually want our lives to be like this. They are full. There are tons of moving parts. That's great. Like I love when people have burstingly full lives, but you feel on top of it. And that is a fantastic way to feel.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think part of it is the feeling that we have no control. That we're reacting to everyone else's demands or expectations. And so we derail ourselves sometimes by, 9 a.m., much less Tuesday. But so let's go back to a couple of these just a little bit. So I've done several podcasts recently and workshops on the importance of sleep. I am now an avid believer that that is the foundation for everything because we need to heal overnight, right? But what's a good guideline for someone trying to figure out their best bedtime? Because like for me, and I'm a scheduler, but if I go to bed too early, like I may be really tired, but if I go to bed too early, I'm going to wake up way too early, right? Like it doesn't work. Like I think, oh, tonight I'll go to bed at 8 o'clock, but then I'm awake at 2 a.m. So how can someone, what's a good, I don't know, tip on how to kind of figure out what the best bedtime is for you?
Yeah. So mostly this is just a math problem. Most adults have to wake up at pretty set times, at least during the week, because of work or family responsibilities. So the only variable that can move is the time you go to bed the night before, right? And I always joke that going to bed early is how grown-ups can sleep in. So, that's something your listeners might want to think about as we think about what time we want to put ourselves lovingly but firmly to bed. First, you want to figure out how much sleep you need. And one of the best ways to do this is to keep track of your time for a couple of weeks. I maintain that many people who are not chronic insomniacs, which is its own separate medical issue, but if you are not suffering from that, your body probably has a fairly strong set point that it is going to keep aiming to. And I see this in my own life. I track my time because I'm a bit of a productivity, nutcase. I don't know, what do you want to call it? But I've been tracking my time for 7 years. And so I know that I average 7.4 hours of sleep per day. And I do this no matter what is happening. That doesn't mean I get that every single night. What it means is that over a period of about 2 months, that is what my body will make me get to. And so if I skimp for a week or two, because it's, one of my kids has been sick, if I've had a lot of early morning flights or anything like that, I will be making it up for the next few weeks by going to bed early, by sleeping later in the morning, by taking naps, all those things that your body makes you do in order to get back to your set point. So, your listeners might try tracking their time for a couple of weeks and seeing. If you don't know, if that sounds terrible, try choosing a reasonable number, like 7.5 hours, right? And then experiment with that. Like, okay, if you have to wake up at 6:30 in the morning and you want to say that the amount of sleep you need is 7.5 hours, then your bedtime would be 11 p.m., right? This is just math. If you know you need 8 hours of sleep and you need to wake up at 5:30 a.m., then your bedtime is 9:30. Again, this is not about how fun we are. It's not about what kind of people we are. It is just a math problem. And in order to make sure that you hit your bedtime, it's generally wise to set an alarm for about 30 minutes before that, which allows you to wrap up any loose ends, to brush your teeth, to do whatever you have to do to wind down to get into bed at that moment. So you don't, suddenly realize, oh, it's my bedtime, and you're still going strong at that point. Like most people do need a little bit of wind down. But I find that when people stick to their bedtimes and don't vary from them really by more than an hour on weekends, like your energy levels just go through the roof. You're not hitting the weekend with a huge sleep debt that you have to then pay off, which then means you can't go to bed on time on Sunday night because you slept in, and then you start the cycle all over again. You find yourself doing crazy things like, if I get to bed at 11 p.m. every night, and remember, I need 7.4 hours, I literally pop up at 6:24 on Saturday morning. It's like magic. I don't know what it is, but that's what I need. If I'm getting it every night, then that's what we hit. And when my subjects in the book and for the Tranquility by Tuesday project did this, they saw similar results. The proportion of people who said that they had enough, that they felt rested enough to handle their responsibilities rose by a quarter over the course of the study. So we're really talking some huge energy swings.
Yeah. And again, everyone feels like they can't get everything done and they're stressed and they're tired, and just getting that right amount of sleep each night makes an enormous difference. Thank you. So the movement part is also one of my, I don't want to say obsessions lately, but you talk in the book about how much more sedentary we got during the pandemic shutdowns. And I was grossly affected by it because I'm pretty hyper and I'm normally running around. I'm doing workshops. I'm driving all over the place. I was very physically active. And I went from that to sitting here for 10 or 12 hours a day, every day, trying to convert everything to be online and whatever. And I ended up with a condition that was quite painful. And so I now set alarms for movement about every hour, just a little bit. I don't mean like I'm taking off a half an hour each time, but talk about, there's other benefits to this besides avoiding pain. So
although that is a big one, and
it is
hugely motivational. I will say that.
Yeah, I'm very motivated to get up every hour now. But can you share the stimulant side of exercise? Because I think people, when you say exercise, they go, "Oh, I don't have time to go to the gym." But we're not talking about going to the gym, and I agree with this.
We're not talking about going to the gym at all. I mean, if you want to go, great.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to talk you out of it. But I'm saying my move by 3 p.m. rule, I said move for 10 minutes. 10 minutes we can fit in the schedule somewhere. And most people just walked. I'm not saying you got to do something crazy. And, it's funny because the excuses people have. Yes. I had people say something like, well, if I'm going to exercise, I have to change before and shower after. And so it's going to take 40 minutes for me to do this 10 minutes of movement. I'm like, no, it will not. If you manage to walk from the parking lot to your desk without taking a shower, my guess is that you can go do some sort of walking without it, necessitating some huge thing. But yes, mentally quadrupling the amount of time something takes is a handy way to talk yourself out of just about anything. But the benefits are huge. I mean, we know exercise is a known mood booster. I mean, there's been some fascinating studies comparing exercise to antidepressant medication for people who have mild to moderate depression. And I'm not saying that, there aren't other things you should be doing if you fall into those categories. Obviously, there's a multifaceted treatment plan for depression, but moving helps a lot, right? And so, people who don't necessarily fall into those categories can also see mood benefits from moving a lot. It helps our energy. There was an interesting study I came across that had people just do 5-minute microbursts of activity. And generally what they had them do is run up and down the stairs in their workplaces, because that was something people could do. When they said that they were feeling particularly weary during the day, their energy was at a 3 on a 10-point scale. And after running up and down for 5 minutes or so, these people put themselves at a 9 on the 10-point scale. And they were still up there, they were still north of a 6, an hour later. So we're talking, investing that 5 minutes in doing something allowed them to be more energetic for the next hour versus just sitting there and feeling like I can't get anything done. So, I'm telling people to think of exercise not as something that's going to make you look great in a swimsuit, lose weight. I could not care less about that. I am talking about making you feel better, making you have more energy, making you approach it. It basically is like building a reset button into your day, right? When you go, make yourself take a 10-minute active break some point in the first half of your day, all of a sudden the rest of the day looks like it's more doable.
Yeah. And I know it sounds counterintuitive to some people to think when they're tired and what they want to do is kind of slump down in a chair, and rest. If they get up and move, it passes, it does, like you said, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And for me, it lasts 2 or 3 hours. So as soon as I start getting that feeling, I'm like, I need to go take a walk, or I need to, go out in the back and garden for 10 minutes or anything just to get up and move. So totally agree with that one. So the second part of the book is really about what you call making good things happen. And rule 4 is your 3 times a week habit. And I found this take interesting because I am one of those people who've really always assumed or practiced doing something every day to make it a habit. But you make a good point about the 3 days will make it a habit. And I was wondering if you could explain why that's beneficial for people.
Well, we get to define habits any way we want. And, most people would think of like going to work as a habit, but they go to work 5 days a week. Like they don't do it 7 days. There are many things we do fewer than 7 days a week that we still consider to be habits. And so I would say that generally when you do something 3 times a week, it feels like it's happening regularly. And so I feel like you can say it's part of your identity. Like if you play the piano 3 times a week, you are a piano player. If you run 3 times a week, you are a runner. If your family eats meals together 3 times a week, you are a family that eats together. So if you do something 3 times a week, you can have it be part of your identity. And the reason this matters is that for a lot of things that people do wish to do, especially during the very busy years of life, when people are, say, building a career, raising a family, you can't do these things every day. And if you hold up daily as what you should be doing and as the only thing that counts, then you'll just constantly feel defeated. But we don't have to say daily. I mean, again, if you go to work 5 days a week and think that that's a habit, like, then why not something that happens 3 or 4 times a week? And often 3 is doable because people are doing these things that are important to them. They're just not doing them as much as they want. And so if you get discouraged and you're like, oh, I'm playing the piano, but I only get to do it like once or twice a week. Well, if your goal is 3, like that's within reach, right? How exciting. We just have to tweak our schedule, scale it up a little bit, as opposed to thinking we need to do a total schedule overhaul. And I found that for so many people, letting go of this idea that things had to happen daily or it didn't count allowed them to actually do more of the thing because they weren't feeling so defeated. And so they're like, yeah, I can get to 3. And now I'm doing this thing that feels life-giving to me, as opposed to just lamenting that I'm not doing it enough. So a lot of letting go of the guilt and letting people change their identities now, as opposed to thinking they need to wait for some future time when life is going to calm down.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what I really liked about the approach, is that it feels less overwhelming. And again, because people are so busy, I know you must be you have 5 children.
I do.
Yeah,
have 5 kids.
So
yes.
just even if you didn't have a full-time career, that's very busy. So I think people should really take this to heart, because if you figured this out, that's a good example. Let's go to rule 6, which is one big adventure, one little adventure in the book. And you share your Norwegian experience. And I thought it was a really great example about how to make certain time memorable. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so this rule to do one big adventure and one little adventure each week is really about building more memories into our lives, because memories make us feel that time is more expansive. It doesn't just disappear into these memory sinkholes. The phrase I use is that we don't say, where did the time go, when we remember where the time went. And having little adventures in our lives is one way to do this. And the example I start this chapter with is just asking this question of like, how is it that I can remember an afternoon in 2006 in this just incredible level of detail? And the reason is because I got lost in a blizzard on a Norwegian mountaintop, right? And it was like, it like around the summer solstice. So you weren't prepared for a blizzard. And, my husband and I were hiking and we got lost in the blizzard. We came across some Norwegian soldiers who were hiking on their leave, who were also lost. The 6 of us together, like, got ourselves out of there, got down the mountain eventually, all good.
You're here.
I'm here. But it was just clearly a very memorable sort of experience. Like, you don't forget that very easily. Whereas, so it really wasn't that long. I mean, it was maybe like, 5-6 hours, which is the same amount of time that was like, yesterday between lunch and dinner. Like, but can I remember yesterday between lunch and dinner in like excruciating detail? Well, no, I cannot. And the reason is that it just wasn't as memorable as getting lost in a blizzard on a Norwegian mountaintop. Now, I am not suggesting that anyone go and get themselves lost in a blizzard on a Norwegian mountaintop, but I am pointing out that it is when things are novel, intense, out of our comfort zone, different than what is normally happening day to day, that is what makes us create memories. And if we, live by this principle that the more memories we have, the more rich and full time seems, then we need to figure out a way to make more memories in our lives. And this idea of doing one big adventure, one little adventure each week is trying to strike a good balance between, people be like, well, I like my routines. I like your routines too. Like, routines are great. Routines make good choices automatic. And, we also don't want to exhaust or bankrupt ourselves. but doing 2 novel things per week, 2 things that are just out of the ordinary or memorable per week, can strike that good balance. A big adventure is something that might take 3 to 4 hours. So think half a weekend day, just something to put into your weekend to make your weekend a little bit more interesting when you're talking about it on Monday morning. And then a little adventure is something that can take less than an hour. So you could do it on your lunch break, you could do it on a weekday evening, just as long as it's something out of the ordinary. And if you put those 2 adventures into your life each week, you will change your entire perception of time. I mean, the people who did this, like, they changed their perceptions of themselves. They're like, we are adventurous people. We are the kind of people who do fun stuff, which is just a very different way to go through life. And also knowing you have adventures coming up, people schedule fun things, they start looking forward to them. And, life changes entirely when we constantly have stuff we are looking forward to.
Yeah, it's so good for the mind, so good for the emotions too, right? Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. And again, the little adventure doesn't have to be, some dramatic thing that's going to take up time or money, or it's just really kind of stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit. And that does trigger that response in the brain. So I thought that was great. Rule 7 is to take one night for you. And what I found interesting about this that was different, that I hadn't really explored before, is you disagree with the concept that fun activities have to be flexible. And so can you explain why a regularly scheduled fun experience, like right there, it sounds funny, right? It's going to be a scheduled fun experience, is beneficial. And
commitment to fun, yes.
Yeah. And also, what can people do about the guilt involved of saying this night is just for me?
Yeah, so I am encouraging people to take one night per week, or the equivalent number of hours on a weekend, whatever you want to do, but to do something that is not work and is not your family responsibilities. And, I want every adult in a household to be able to do this, right? So, doesn't matter, people are working or not working, but, both of you take one night per week off for something that is just for you. And when I suggested people do this, I asked people what they thought they would do in the study, and I got a ton of people saying, "So I'm going to take a bubble bath. I'm going to read for fun," and those are great. Those are great ideas. But what I was really getting at with this idea is to make a commitment to something that is, not work and not family responsibility. So I, for instance, sing in a choir. We meet every Thursday night at 7 p.m. The rehearsal starts in a specific place at a specific time. Like, I need to be there, right? But I have found that it is the commitment that makes busy people do it. Because you think about it, if your fun you want to have every week is taking a bubble bath. Like, when are you going to do it? I don't know. Well, you're sort of looking around. It's not a specific time. So it kind of doesn't necessarily always happen. So you can't necessarily look forward to it. And maybe you say, okay, Thursday night's when I'm going to do my long bubble bath. And then, your boss has some thing they want you to take care of. And you're like, well, okay, I can do that, because it's just a bubble bath. Or your kid wants you to drive her to the mall on Thursday night. And you're like, well, my bathtub isn't going anywhere. And then, so things that can happen whenever. What I say is that they often wind up happening never, because they just, everything else will push it around. Your fun being flexible means that your fun becomes contingent on other people not wanting you to do something else. So if you are serious about your fun, you need to make a commitment to it. And so if you are playing in a string quartet at 7 p.m. on Tuesdays, if you don't show up, it is a string trio, right? Like, you have to be there. And so you will be there even when life is busy. Like, you'll tell your kid, I'll drive you to the mall tomorrow night, but I can't do it tonight. Like, you work out with your colleagues that if there's some emergency on Tuesday night, they cover it because you promised to cover for them on Monday or Wednesday, right? Like, this is just what you start to do in order to make it happen. And this can be transformative in our lives. Like, when we know we have this thing coming up, it's like a mini vacation in the middle of the week. And it just allows people to feel like they always have something to look forward to. The same thing we talked about with the adventures, to feel that they are more than work and family responsibilities, that they get to have fun too.
Yeah, I thought it was excellent. And I had sort of an insight. I love learning, and people think I'm odd because I keep going back to school or signing up for classes, whatever, workshops. But it didn't dawn on me until I read this that, oh, that's because then it is a commitment and I'm firm about it. Right. So it's me time, even though I'm in a classroom or, in a hotel ballroom or something, but it's setting that boundary that, I love you, or I'm committed to my work, but I've committed to this and I have to, because, it's class time. And I didn't realize that must be part of what motivates me, or part of my love of going to like a formal training or formal school, is because I'm off limits, and we're not good at that. Like with the bubble bath or many other things, right? If it's not something that is really set like that, we do give in all the time. And I was thinking about, like, all the rest of the time, it's like, okay, well, this is more important than my whatever, but not if I've paid for classes and I'm committed to the topic. I gotta go.
Go. Yeah. So having someplace you need to go really does make it happen.
Makes a huge difference. That's great. Okay, so part 3 is about wasting less time. And one of the areas that you cover is batching the little things. And I am devoted to batching, based more on neuroscience. Like, I've figured out I can get so much more done if I kind of stay in the same lane for a while. If it's writing time, it's writing everything, writing, podcasts, writing articles, writing blogs, but I try to batch them. But you talk about batching the little things to save time. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about why batching activities actually helps us waste less time.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about various things that people wind up having on their brains that they need to do, there's a million forms that need to be filled out, or ordering household supplies, or, paying bills, or all these tasks that do need to get done, but they are not really our top priority at any given point. And, what tends to happen is people sort of just do them, either when they think of them, or just sort of like they want to clear the decks, like get through all the little stuff, then I can finally focus on the big stuff. But our brains just don't work that way. I mean, you run out of energy. So you start your day by like, okay, I'm going to cross these 8 things off my list, and then I'll get to the big stuff. Like, by the time you cross the 8 things off your list, like, you got a meeting, you got a call, there's lunch, and then your energy drops, and it's you never get to the big stuff, and it can feel very frustrating. Or even worse, if we have some creative project we're wrestling with, this is the more insidious problem. You're like, okay, I'm going to write this thing. It's really important for me to write this thing. And, oh, did I pay that bill? And then you stop what you're doing, stop wrestling with the issue to go pay the bill, because, yes, it needs to be done, but it's also a convenient way to give yourself a little shot in the arm, like, ooh, I did something, I crossed something off the list, and give yourself the easy win, but it might be depriving you of the bigger win that would come from longer, more focused periods of work. Or with relaxation, people will wind up like jumping up every minute to do something and never feel like they can sit down and relax. So I suggest creating a batching time. I do sort of a longer batching time, often on Fridays, where I push anything non-urgent to Friday and try to do it then. But, if that doesn't work for you, because some people have stuff that they've got to get to quicker, maybe you can do a short batching period after lunch on the workday, right? But push all the small stuff to then, and leave, the times when you're better able to focus open for deeper work. Or on weekends, for instance, if you have a list of things you need to take care of, confine it to one window. Right. So if you find yourself looking at a task at some other point that needs to happen, like your library books are sitting there, they need to go back to the library, and you start feeling guilty on Saturday because you're not doing it. You're like, wait, no, there is a time. I have a batch time for all this stuff at 4 p.m. on Saturday. If it is not 4 p.m. on Saturday, I don't need to do it. I don't have to feel guilty looking at those library books. I can just relax. So this is what I want people to do. I want them to leave time open for deeper work or for relaxation. And by batching the little things, we can do that.
Yeah, I thought that was excellent. And I really do think our brains are so overtasked from task switching. You know what I mean? Where it takes so long to get back on track once you do that. So like you were saying, if you're in the middle of writing something, and that's one of my biggest challenges all the time, is getting that block of time to focus on writing. And it's tempting to go, oh, well, there's 14 things over here I could knock out in 1 hour, and I'd feel really good about myself. But then, of course, I don't, because now I've still got to go back to the writing. And then it's harder to get your brain back in that mode. So I definitely think that's effective. Okay. The last rule is effortful before effortless. And you say, and I think this is a quote right out of the book. You say that leisure time is too precious to be totally leisurely about leisure. So what do you mean by that? And what is effortful fun versus effortless? It's a mouthful. Effortless
yes,
fun.
It is. It's funny because I just recorded the audiobook of this, and I was like, the effortful. It's hard to say. So effortful fun is fun that takes a little bit of effort. So it's slightly more active fun. Things like reading, hobbies, crafting, puzzles, communicating with friends and family. These are all sorts of, high value leisure activities. And they are the things that people say, oh, I'd love to do more of if only I had the time. Now, the funny part of that is because we spend a ton of time, many of us, on effortless fun. This is, often passive fun, things like social media, reading headlines, watching TV, or, streaming things like that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with effortless fun. There's a lot of fun stuff online. There's a lot of great shows out there that people can stream. It's wonderful. But the problem is, because these things are easier, we tend to fill the bulk of our leisure time with them. And we spend less time on the effortful fun that would in fact bring us a lot more joy. And so my point with this rule is challenging people to do just a few minutes of effortful fun before they do effortless fun. So if you are, for instance, picking up your phone to start scrolling around, like you got 5 minutes, you're waiting for a phone call to start, you're waiting for the carpool to bring your kids home. You're like, I'm picking up my phone, I'm just looking through it. Like, we don't even notice we're doing that. And this is how we wind up with like 3 hours of screen time a day. It's like all there in little 5-minute chunks. But when you open your phone, it would be just as easy to go to, let's say, the Kindle app, or Nook, or Apple's Books app, right? And start reading an ebook. And just read for 2 to 3 minutes, and then you can go scroll around however much you like. Right? Or that moment at night after you have gotten your kids to bed, or you finished your chores, there's that moment of truth. What am I going to do? I've got 2 hours before my bedtime. So, instead of just crashing on the couch, challenge yourself to do like 15 to 20 minutes of something creative, or a puzzle, or, calling a friend. And then you can collapse on the couch and stream whatever you want for the rest of the night, right? But by committing to do the effortful fun first, a couple things happen. One is, often people keep going with the effortful fun, because it turns out to be more fun to talk to a friend than to look at photos of influencers online who are wearing matching outfits with their entire family, doing whatever it is they're doing, selling a product. So you probably will want to keep going, and that's great. But even if you don't, like, these small bits of time can add up. So, you read for 3 minutes, 10 times a day, that's another 30 minutes of reading. Like, that's quite a bit. And you also just get to do both kinds of fun, because the problem is, when you sit down and start with the effortless fun, you won't switch over to the effortful fun, because it just takes effort. And it's hard to stop what you're doing and go do that. Whereas if you start with the effortful fun, then you will have both kinds of fun. So, you can read a chapter in War and Peace for 5 minutes, and then go watch Selling Sunset for the rest of the evening, and still be the kind of person who does both.
Yeah, I think it's such an opportunity to improve your quality of life. Just that one rule, because I agree, we don't realize how much time we waste doing things that we will never remember. We're not going to look back and go, oh, thank goodness I saw that Instagram or TikTok or whatever, right?
Well, and this was honestly one of the most impactful rules of the entire survey. I mean, when I asked people at the end of the study, to agree, agree or disagree on a 7-point scale with the question, the statement, yesterday I didn't waste time on things that didn't matter to me. Scores on that one rose 32% over the course of the study. Which is just a huge amount, right? Like,
right,
just, people felt like they were wasting less time. And these were busy people. I mean, their lives didn't suggest a whole lot of wasted time in the first place. But with this rule, they were wasting even less of it. They were having a lot more fun with their limited leisure time.
Wonderful. Well, one of the things I really appreciated about the book is simply you provided a framework for people to be really very mindful about their time. And most people don't realize how mindless they are about their time, right? They feel like they're busy and overwhelmed, but a lot of it is simply they don't have the structure in place. And I don't mean, like, again, not a rigid structure, but a process to check in and be mindful about how are they spending their time? What are they doing in that time? I love the memory making part, because I've never really, kind of pursued that aspect of to kind of making memories an intention, instead of it just happening and then it's memorable. So definitely appreciated that. You include step-by-step instructions on how to go about it. I do, again, appreciate that you included the participants' reactions and responses to these rules, because I think a lot of people will find something that they can resonate with, or ways to adjust so that they can still try some of these. And I really think that if someone is struggling with their time management, which you have a place in the book where you talk about the fact that there's 168 hours in the week, and we actually have 72 hours that are discretionary. And it made me laugh because I do a workshop on this, and that's exactly what I have in there. Like, you have 72 hours. That's a lot every week. And we don't think of it that way. We're like, oh, by the time we get home, there's no time left. Blah. We don't do anything. So you have 72 hours each week to do something with. In addition to reading the book, of course, can you just share one final thought about maybe where our listeners could start if they're trying to get their time management under better control?
Well, I always suggest that people do try tracking their time, ideally for a week, because that is the, fundamental unit of how we live our lives. That's the cycle of life that keeps repeating. But try tracking your time, see where it goes. If you want to spend your time better, it helps to know where the time is going now. Because otherwise, how do you know if you're changing the right thing? Maybe something you thought was a problem just isn't. Maybe something you've never even considered, taking far more time than you might imagine. We always want to work from good data. I love data. And so we want to make sure that we're working from correct data. And so I'd suggest people figure that out. Take a good look at your life, and you might be surprised or you might not, but it doesn't hurt to find out.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, we do an exercise in the workshop where we have them write down, and I think I've got it in 15-minute increments, but like, what does your typical day look like? Just fill in what you do. And every time, and it's supposed to total 24 hours, right? And instead it totals 16 or 18. And then they're like, but where, and the exercise is called, where does the time go? And it's like, well, what were you filling in those? You did something for the 24 hours, right? So I think sometimes you will be surprised because you don't realize. So I think that's excellent advice. And I want to thank you so much for all of the wisdom today. And again, the book is Tranquility by Tuesday, 9 Ways to Calm the Chaos and Make Time for What Matters. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, I encourage you to meditate daily and be mindful in all of your everyday activities. Simply bring your full awareness to the present moment to build your mindfulness skills, paying attention to every detail of what you're doing, from washing dishes to work tasks to taking a walk. Your mind will wander, and that's normal. Each time you notice it has wandered, that's mindfulness. Consider how wonderful the world could be if everyone was mindful. You can help make that happen. It all starts with a mindful moment. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to other great shows like the Daily Meditation Podcast, Everything Everywhere, and Movie Therapy. We deeply appreciate your support at patreon.com/amindfulmoment. Please be sure to subscribe to A Mindful Moment and follow us on Instagram at A Mindful Moment Podcast. Visit our website, amindfulmoment.com, to access podcasts, scripts, and book recommendations. A Mindful Moment is written and hosted by Teresa McKee and/or Melissa Sims. The Spanish version is translated and hosted by Paola Tile. Intro music, Retreat by Jason Farnham. Outro music, Morning Stroll by Josh Kirsch, Media Right Productions. Thank you for tuning in. This podcast is produced by Work to Live Productions.